All right, the next piece is to start creating something with the conversational DXF. So we're just going to do that real quick because I'd like to put something in that box, the large recess that we did. That was a 50 millimeter by 50 millimeter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a search for a file, and I happen to know that I collect DXF files. And so I have something very specific here that I work with. And I want to use this Tormach Box in text. I've manipulated and worked with this a little bit, but it's a DXF file. It's going to tell me that it doesn't read the units on this, which is fine. I'm going to show you how we're going to read those units. I'm going to have to click back in here in order to activate it. And the beautiful thing is it tells me that what I have currently is at 26 millimeters across. Well, that's at a scale of 0.5 from the original file. So this is how I'm going to manipulate the size, and this is how I'm going to double check that size. So in a 50 millimeter box, 2 inches across roughly, I've got something that is roughly just a little bit over an inch across and about the same in terms of its height. I can go ahead and change this a little bit larger. So if I take this and let's go to 0.75. Let's check. Okay, so 40. So this is just going to fit in there just barely, but I have to start thinking about, well, where do I want this position? So I've got a Z start. We're at a -5. So I have to keep in track of all the work that I've done. However, here's the beauty of it. I don't want to do this engraving with tool 4. So I'm going to have to reset this, and I can set it from inside the box. So let's first change out our tool, and then we're going to come back and do all of our settings. All right, I've done some calculations here based off of these two numbers. We're ready to go. So let me show you some of the math that I've done. Knowing that it's going in a 50 millimeter box. All right, we need to set this up in terms of this point from our origin, work coordinate offset. So we'll come back to the Z's here in just a second. So our offset is not going to be -2. We're going to have our X offset based off of this work at 100 millimeters. And our Y offset is going to be 38 millimeters. And again, I'm going to run this slow just to make sure everything's working the way I want it to run. Now, in terms of our depth of cut, I'm going to keep this really shallow, 0.01. I'm going to use that as my endpoint there. However, this we're going to set as 0, and I need to go into the work product and actually set my tool to that. My tool is actually going to be tool 31. It's an engraving bit. We'll keep everything else basically the same here. I'm going to set this, though, at 15, just to make sure that I don't nick anything with the tip of this. All right, let's go ahead and post this. And we'll see how that's going to look. Save. And there we go. If I zoom out, right, one of the things I can do is I can set my piece over the corner, my end mill, and then come over here and double check, does that look like it's going to be where it needs to be? So let's go ahead and set that up. So here's what I'm going to do. This is where my tool is right now at the bottom corner. And I'm just going to use my jog mouse in order to trace this and see if it matches the way I want it in my box. Right now, it doesn't look like it's centered quite right. So I'm going to have to come back and do some manipulation. So I can tell that this side is a little bit different or more gap in my box than that side. So I'm going to take a little bit of time in order to rearrange this. All right, let me show you what I've done. I can see right here, this is where my tip is of my end mill engraver. And if I'm looking at my squares here, 1, 2, 3, right here about basically 1.5 should be the center. Now, the reason I point this out is because of the milling application that we did, it worked from the center out. So I kind of can have, if you will, little drawing lines, little faint lines on my box that help me guide as to where my center might be. So now I like where everything's at. I'm feeling pretty comfortable to go ahead and run this. All right. I thought I was going to nail it. However, this is an example of where you should air cut about 2 millimeters above so that you can see where it's actually going to cut. So I did not get this centered like I thought I had it centered, and I'd want to go back and probably redo this. However, I can easily go in and mill this down a little bit deeper in terms of that pocket because I still have it. I could take it down to 5.5 millimeters, probably erase all of that in a sense because all of my settings from my work coordinate offset, my G54, are still there. So those are some things that you can work on. But again, cutting air, that gives you an idea, and then you can go through and readjust this. So obviously my calculations were wrong. I need to go back and modify. All right, they always say hindsight is 20/20. Here's what I noticed. If I were to take into the overall consideration here, this is where my mark is, and that's the bottom of my point. So for some reason in this graphic, I've got all this distance that I did not take into calculation. I only took from the top to here. So instead of 3 boxes, it's nearly 3 3/4 boxes, if you will. So that being a center point is wrong. And that's why I was off. So double check your graphics when you're in there. And again, cut air, and that'll be a huge factor for getting it right the first time. Otherwise, always have a practice and then come back and run it again.